It was an election that was high on symbolism, a fractured Iraq voting for the first time after the defeat of ISIL. But now the outcome of what should have been a free and fair election is under scrutiny, with hopes of a peaceful transition to power in Iraq be dashed again. This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I am Hashim Al-Barra. It's been more than 3 weeks since Iraqis went to the polls, but the result was split and no single political bloc has been able to form a government. The UN is urging a quick solution to be found so the country moves forward towards much-needed reforms. But now it seems that process could be further delayed, as Charles Stratford reports from Baghdad.
Members of the Iraqi parliament called an open special session on Monday, following more allegations of fraud during parliamentary elections earlier this month. They called for votes in the predominantly Sunni provinces of Anbar, Diyala, Salahuddin and Nineveh, and all ballots cast by Iraqis living abroad to be manually recounted. If the results differ by more than 25% from those announced by the Electoral Commission, then it could force a recount of nearly 11 million ballots. The demand was supported by many Sunni politicians and others who opposed the election results, which saw a successful outcome for three main Shia-led blocs in Iraq's first election since the defeat of ISIL.
There are frauds, manipulations and many problems that took place, and that is seen apparent in the decisions made by Parliament today, and I personally support these decisions in which they serve in the interest of the political and democratic process in Iraq. Therefore we must implement these decisions.
Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi warned in his weekly news conference of potential political instability if demands for recounts continued.
I must warn of something. We can't get into a political limbo. We are checking all violations and complaints. I must say that the political process is important. We can't get into a political vacuum. Parliament only has 30 days left to finish its legal term, and the new parliament must take effect after that. Without a new parliament in place, there will be a constitutional gap.
On Wednesday, Parliament's special session continued. 28 parliamentarians put together a draft law for a complete recount of votes across all of Iraq, and for it to be supervised by the Iraqi judiciary and the UN mission in the country. Iraq's Independent Election Commission cancelled votes at 1,021 of the country's 53,000 ballot boxes. They were mainly in the predominantly Sunni provinces of Anbar, Salahuddin and Nineveh, and 67 outside the country. For many Iraqis, including those who voted abroad, allegations of voting fraud comes as no surprise.
I'm sorry to say that we have no hope.
Last four years, it's same. They avoided the result also in UK.
I'm not hoping for a change in the coming years, because if we keep electing these people, then these people are not going to have a change in the future.
In order for any country-wide recount law to be passed, it would have to be ratified by 50% plus one of Iraq's 329-member parliament before then being signed off by the Supreme Court. But no matter the kind of legal difficulties that these 28 MPs that are pushing for this country-wide recount face, the issue highlights just how difficult it is to form a government in Iraq after years of violence and political instability. Charles Stratford for Inside Story, Baghdad.
If the recount does go ahead, it would impact about 10% of votes cast overall. But that could prove decisive in an election that produced no clear winner. Here's where things stand now. Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr's Sa'irun bloc won the most parliamentary seats, 54. Sadr, though, is not putting himself forward as Prime Minister. Hadi al-Amiri's Al-Fatih party came a close second with 47 seats. He's known to have close ties with Iran and headed a coalition of armed groups against ISIL. The incumbent Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi's Victory Alliance trailed in third place with 42 seats. The elections in Iraq were marked by a record low turnout, but were free from serious violence. Let's now get the thoughts of our guests. Joining us in Baghdad, Ahmed Rushdi, Director of House of Iraqi Expertise Foundation and Senior Foreign Policy Advisor to the Speaker of the Iraqi Parliament. In Erbil, Judith Nuring, author and journalist and founder of the Independent Media Center in Kurdistan. In Washington, D.C., Christine Van den Turn, Director of the Institute of Regional and International Studies. Warm welcome to you all. Ahmed, are we talking about a glitch here or there's something more serious to it?
Well, Hisham, it looks like that everyone is looking for his own interest. The parliament, or let's say this parliament, is actually supporting the recounting, the manual recounting vigorously, and want to say that the committee, the IHAC, the electoral committee, actually made major frauds in so many provinces in Iraq. And IHAC, the electoral committee, actually, they are responsible for that. That's why the law showed that it's supposed to be the judges who take the control of the committee first, and then the manual recounting will happen. Then thirdly, there will be new results about, let's say, the end results of the elections that happen in May, in the early of May. Now, this is a side. The other side is actually IHAC now, is that they are saying, no, we didn't do anything, the results is real, and we were also convinced that the digital counting is the same with the manual counting. It will be the same results.
So
it looks like we have two separate partners, or let's say two separate parts in this issue.
Okay, Judith, so the plan now is to recount about 10% of the votes cast overall. However, if there's a difference of about 25%, they might call for a recount across the board. Is this something that could change the political map in Iraq?
You would think so. I mean, if you look at the effect of the ballot boxes, or I should say the polling stations that have already been pulled out, that are no longer valid, the saying here is that 21 candidates who have been elected in mostly Sunni provinces are no longer sure of their seats. So it might have a big effect. And the effect, I think, is even bigger if you look at the fact that what does this say about democracy in this country? What does it say about the fairness of a ballot box? Another problem that I would like to address here is IHAC itself, the election committee. They are, the board of it exists completely of politicians. And the parliament has decided who is on that board. So how independent are you in that kind of system?
Christine, for the time being, do you think this is something that would just address the issue of a recount, or that could further grow to call for new elections in Iraq?
Yes, I mean, the opposition parties in the Kurdistan region are calling for recount, but also for new elections if the violations and the evidence of irregularities is so huge and so widespread that it would even invalidate or a manual recount. Because one of their points is that because of the multiple types of fraud committed, allegedly, that even a recount would be tainted because of old biometric cards used or forged national IDs, that, again, even a manual recount would not expose the true results. However, I will say there's also a knowledge and understanding that, you know, new elections could also be destabilizing, though I think letting stand results that are questioned so widely is, of course, equally destabilizing.
Let's take a closer look at the areas and demography where results are at stake here. As Charles said in the report, 28 members of Iraq's parliament are drafting a bill that would allow a manual vote recount across the country. The bill also calls for votes from Iraqis living in other countries and the internally displaced to be annulled and recounted manually. The Electoral Commission has already cancelled results of 1,021 of the 53,000 ballot boxes used in the elections, including 67 abroad. Ahmed, the Sunnis have been saying that they have been discriminated against and that the results of the elections didn't run in their own favor. Do you think that the united bloc led by Ayad al-Alawi could be one of the blocs to benefit from any calls for new elections or a recount?
Well, I think Ayad al-Alawi and the Wataniya is already making some sort of a coalition, a wide coalition, which account about 27 MPs, 27 new MPs. And it's Wataniya, it's Saleh al-Mutlaq, and it's also with Muhammad Tamim, with others inside the Sunni area that making about 27 new MPs. And also they are negotiating with Osama al-Nujayfi to also join this coalition, which means that we are talking about more than 35 new MPs. A coalition on that wide, that means they will have the huge share inside the 70 or let's say 72 new MPs, 72 Sunni new MPs. Now, I think, Hisham, we must separate between the violence that it is connected to the recount and the violence that it will be connected to making the government. It's two separate things, because on this way, the first thing is that we are thinking about the recount and how the recount will change the seats. That means there will be some seats outside the Sunni ballot going to the maybe to the Fatah, maybe to the Nasr. No one knows.
This is exactly why we're asking these questions, because as you know, this is a close election, and the moment you get a very tiny difference, that could lead to a political realignment in the country. Judith, we've seen Kurdish parties threatening to boycott the political process in Iraq if their demands about cancelling the results of the elections in Kurdistan are not met. Are they likely to move forward now, build more momentum towards asking for new elections?
Well, the interesting thing here in Kurdistan is if you look at what the election committee has decided to annul, they are not so much the voting stations in Sulaymaniyah, where most of the outcry is, but it is mostly in Duhok, where KDP, the largest Kurdish party, won enormously, and in Erbil here, where also KDP won. So on the whole, all of Kurdistan seems to be somehow tainted with fraud. If all this is going to be recounted, we have another question. Are the ballot boxes really safe? And will the counting of those ballot boxes be the same as what people actually did on the machines? There's a lot of things we do not know. There's a lot of ways of fraud. And if you listen to the politicians here, some of them are like Goran, the change movement. They are really angry, and they are even considering making their own militia, as they are saying, as long as parties like KDP and PUK, the second party, have their own militias, then these irregularities will continue. So we need to have some military power as well. And of course, that's very dangerous. Violence here is always so near to the surface. And that makes it even worse.
Christine, we're talking about a country that has been beset by sectarian divide. The fight against ISIL calls from the international community for the Iraqi government to reach out to the disgruntled, and particularly to the Sunni communities, to the Kurds. A tainted election, is this something that could drag Iraq towards more instability?
Yes, just picking up on Judith's point, I think that is why it's so important to address these grievances because of the widespread allegations of fraud. I mean, there's, as my friends kind of say in Kurdistan, there's not one person here that doesn't think there was fraud. I've heard consistently over the past couple weeks, my vote won't change anything. The only way to change this place is through force. And this is from my friends who are academics, political scientists, professors, my students. And I think that this is a consistent problem in the Middle East. When people always ask, why is the Middle East so violent? My friends from the States ask me this. And I think about elections, when people's voices aren't heard consistently in Middle East history. And this is a perfect example today. They turn to other means. This manifests their voice. How can it be heard? It manifests in different ways that are potentially, I think, more destabilizing for Iraq and for Kurdistan. And so that is why I think that these grievances, these complaints really need to be addressed, where, as some might say in the short term, it might push back government formation, which is a gray area that could be destabilizing. If we look at the medium and long term, if the opposition and the voice of the Kurdish people is not to be heard through the ballot box, then I am concerned about how they will make it heard in other ways.
Okay. Ahmed, after the results were announced, there emerged 3 players who are likely to shape the future of the country. Muqtada al-Sadr, Haidar al-Abadi, and Hadi al-Amiri. Now with the recount thing being triggered, do you think that could change anything as far as their blocks stand?
Well, first of all, until now, the recount didn't happen. That means we're going to wait until the vote for the law, for the new law, that it will be submitted by the parliament maybe next Wednesday or Tuesday. So at that time, if it will happen, I don't think it will change the seats between the 3 players. But I think it will support the claims of the 4th player, who is Mr. Maliki, the state of law, who's now making some sort of a under-table coalition with Al-Fatah, with Hakim, and so on, in a way to try to separate Muqtada al-Sadr, Sa'irun, and and Nasr, in a way or another, to be a weakened wings inside the Shiite cabinet. And maybe at the end of June, there will be another coalition that it will happen that the Nasr will join Maliki and Fatah and Hakim. In a way or another, to separate, or let's say to isolate Muqtada al-Sadr, to isolate Sa'irun, and make Sa'irun an opposition inside the parliament, not making the government, which can be happen.
Judith, are you of the view that this could trigger also new political realignment in the country? We've seen just over the last few days talks about Muqtada al-Sadr being the kingmaker, and that if Al-Abadi becomes prime minister, al-Sadr is the one who's going to have a bigger say. Now we're talking about what if new faces emerge or new votes are taken into account. That could bring everything back to square one.
Yes, especially if you look at the fact that both the 2 bigger parties in Kurdistan, KDP and PUK, have already gone to Baghdad to talk to the different winners to see if they can be part of a coalition. The opposition parties have been, not all of them, I must say, but mostly have been waiting because they don't agree on the outcome. The moment that they can talk as well, I don't see any Kurdish unity happening. So this will probably be a change of blocks. Which one is going to be the biggest, which one is going to be the most interesting, and which of the Kurdish parties do still feel that they can work together. That's going to be the big question here. But let me just put to you, there's another important issue, and that's Kirkuk. In Kirkuk, the PUK, so the 2nd Kurdish party, has won. Now, sure, the Kurds are the biggest group in Kirkuk, but there were a lot of PUK votes in areas that there are no Kurds living, and that usually does not happen. So the Turkmen and the Arabs, they are angry, and they have already been protesting, and this is an issue where a recount is probably the only way to get people to agree to an outcome.
So we're talking
for Kirkuk itself, which is very volatile, this is important.
I see your point. Christine, we're talking about ongoing political divide at a time when the international community, the Americans in particular, because now they have this new reviewing their policy with Iran, they have been saying that they're eager to see a stable government in Iraq. But if you look at these developments, this doesn't seem to be the case anytime soon.
Yeah, I would say, of course, government formation, the sooner the better, is ideal. And, especially for the international community to have this return to or stability in a new government. But I would say we should think about the past 15 years. And I think, for example, one thing that's been very destabilizing for Iraq has been the nature of the Erbil-Baghdad relationship. Haven't had good partners in Baghdad or Erbil. Very zero-sum maximalist politics. Now, we have the exact same situation now because of the results. We have the same parties, PUK, KDP, going down to Baghdad, negotiating with a variety of actors, but flirting a bit with the Nouri Malikis and Hadi Amaris. And I think that instead of pushing too much and hoping that we have this government formation as soon as possible, we should think about the medium and long term. Do we want the same actors forming a same maximalist zero-sum? Do we want a return to the post-2003 cycle of zero-sum politics in Iraq? Or should we wait and take some time and say, are these really the best partners for Iraq? Not just next week or next month, but this coming year and 4 years.
Ahmed, I mean, 15 years after the downfall of Saddam Hussein, do you think that the metrics that the international community has been trying to work on in Iraq still work? Do people still have faith in the political establishment if they have to wake up every now and then about talks of pervasive corruption or tainted elections?
Well, Hisham, frankly speaking, people actually understand that the political process is hopeless. That's why the boycott was, well, it's more than 56%. 44% is only participating in the elections, would show you, and by the way, it's Sunni, Shia, and Kurds. It's not only Sunni, it's not only Shia, it's not only Kurds. Everyone from every ethnic partners inside this country. The most important thing is that we must listen to the people who boycott the political process, because, or let's say boycott the elections, because it sends us a message is that you are wrong. You are always sending us, or let's say you are always pushing corrupted persons, well, let's say the persons who are not, or individuals who are not qualified to control, or let's say to lead this country. We need someone who is eligible to lead this country. By the way, let's also not forget is that the Kurds are united against Haider al-Abadi. They are not accepting Haider al-Abadi as prime minister. So there is also a challenge for Sairun and Nasser to push Haider al-Abadi to the prime minister.
And this is going to be my question now to Judith. I mean, in a country where in the north, for example, you have this push for this pro-independence sentiment, in the Sunni community, there is this feeling that they have been battered and dispossessed, and then you have the Shia who are in power. How do you see the future of Iraq?
Well, it doesn't look very good because, indeed, as you're saying, it's the danger of the country falling apart has been here for a while. And what we saw after the battle against ISIS was that it pulled together again because they all worked together to get ISIS out. Now, these kind of political movements, the way it all is about money and about who is going to get the place so that he can get his cousin and his brother a job. This is really, it's a disaster for this country. And indeed, it's very true. If you don't listen to all those people who didn't go to vote, then what's going to happen after that? So I'm not optimistic about what's happening here, to be quite honest.
Real challenges indeed facing the Iraqi political elite and the country as it's grappling to find a way out to its political crisis. Christine van den Turn, Ahmed Rushdi, Judith Nurek, thank you very much indeed for your contribution to the program. Really appreciate it. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJA Inside Story. From me, Hashim Al-Bara, the whole team here. Bye for now.